There you go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Tipton. I am a professor of data science at Chaminade University of Honolulu, and that's in Honolulu, Hawaii. I do a lot of, in addition to teaching, so I definitely teach data science, and I also do a lot of research on microbiomes. And microbiomes are all of the like bacteria and fungi and other microbes that live in and on an environment. I've done some work on human microbiomes, so like the human lungs and the human skin. I've done some work on environmental microbiomes, so like everything that's kind of floating in the air. And I currently have a project on Hawaiian fruit fly microbiomes. And so what's going on in their guts, because they actually have both bacteria and fungi in their guts. And they make a good model organism for human gut microbiomes, because they're teeny tiny and easy to breed, and they poop a lot. When I talk about gut microbiomes, I'm usually talking about poop, and so I spend a lot of my day thinking and talking about poop. Not really something I expected when I was your age, but here I am. Yeah. I generally don't prepare anything for these sessions. So I have a little spiel. I can talk pretty ad nauseum about a lot of different topics, but I want to hear what questions you guys have for me, about whether that's about my research, what it's like to be a professor or be a woman in science, or living in Hawaii. I'm pretty open to answer any questions you guys have.
Feel free to use the chat too if you don't feel comfortable speaking out loud.
Yes, that's a very good point. My favorite part about my job. I love that moment when everything works. So I do a lot of programming and coding on the computer. And so when it all runs and comes together and I get a result and it's the result that I'm kind of hoping it is, I'm very much one to be like, woohoo. And yeah, this is my office. I very much do a lot of arm movements. And that feeling is really one of my favorite parts, when things come together the way they're supposed to. Ooh, my favorite experiment or project so far. So when I was working on my PhD, let me actually, these are direct messages, so let me actually read them out loud. It's what has been my favorite experiment or project so far. So I did, when I was working on my PhD, so my very last degree, I was looking at the human lung microbiome, so bacteria and fungi in the lungs, and also looking at the skin, so some of the bacteria and fungi that are on human skin. And I was looking at how they interact, and I grew them. I designed the whole experiment, and it was the first time that I got to like grow anything on a petri dish. And so that I guess the background for that is that I kill plants. Like I cannot keep a plant alive. And I was able to grow this fungus, and it grew, and I had these petri dishes of a fungus, and then I got to put a bacteria with it and see what happens when I put the bacteria and fungus together. And it turns out the bacteria doesn't grow as well when the fungus is present. And so that was just really neat. Again, it was like this really neat finding that like no one else knew, no one else had done that, but also that like sense of accomplishment of being able to design an experiment, conduct the experiment, write up the results, and then tell people about it. But also that nice little moment in the middle where I was like, "Ooh, I grew something! It didn't die." Was really very exciting for me, and it felt like an accomplishment, even though like it's already growing on your skin. Like it's clearly there are things alive there that are not dying on my skin. What traits or qualities do you recommend for people who want to become scientists or professors? Any specific courses? So this is going to be a very biased answer. Statistics. So much of science now is data, whether it's data science or biology or anything else, is knowing how to analyze numbers and data. And statistics will give you that foundation. And unfortunately, statistics is not very well taught very often. I meet a lot of people that are like, ooh, statistics, I hated statistics. That was the worst class I ever took. And I'm like, I'm so sorry your teacher sucked. But it really does lay a groundwork, and being able to do that analysis yourself, no matter what field of science you go into, is really important. And so I would say that for being a scientist or being a professor. Being a professor is a little bit more about being able to talk your way through anything. At least in my experience, that's how this is going. When did I decide I wanted to become a scientist? That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't think I ever set out to be a scientist. I always liked math and science. And so, my parents encouraged me from an early age to do things like science clubs and, that kind of thing. And so there was always this idea that I wanted to do something related to science. For a long time, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And I don't know, somewhere that fell off the list of things to do along the way somewhere. But I don't know that I ever set out to be a scientist broadly. It was always a lot more specific than that. Yeah. I don't know. That's a really hard question. When did you decide you wanted to join the STEMsational club? I mean,
some of them probably got drug into it. Here we are.
Okay, so the question is, what specific things drew me to going into this field? Like I said, I was always good with math and science. And I enjoyed them, I guess. For me, statistics and numbers always have to make sense. Like if I ask you, what's the average temperature of the day? Like it's going to be a temperature that happened during that day, right? It's not going to be 100 degrees Fahrenheit isn't going to be the average temperature of the city, except maybe in Arizona. So like it has to make sense in the real world. So for me, like statistics was math that had to make sense in the real world. And so that was really appealing to me. And then I always loved animals and biology. And so then the biology side of things kind of was a way to help people without having to be a doctor and deal with people. I actually don't like dealing with people. Or rather, I never wanted to be a doctor because doctors deal with people when they're at their worst, right? Like when someone is sick and they want help and answers, I was like, that's not going to be me. I don't do well with bodily fluids or people that are grumpy. Like, so yeah, so that's that kind of led me away from being a doctor, which is a common thing that people who are interested in math and science get pushed into. I managed to avoid that push. What exactly is a microbiome? So a microbiome is all of the microbes. So that's microscopic organisms, bacteria, fungi, protists. There's a few other things that may be microscopic that make up an environment, and their abiotic factors. So like I said, I can talk about this one for a long time. So it comes from the word biome, which is really equivalent to ecosystem. So like a savanna or a rainforest or something like that. Like that would be a biome, a macrobiome, if you will. So macro being large. And so microbiomes are the tiny version of that. And so the one that gets talked about a lot is the human gut. And what that is that's actually poop. And so they're examining the bacteria and fungi and microbes that come out in your poop. or maybe on your skin, but on your skin, there's a lot of different microbiomes. So like the community of organisms that live on your forehead is not the same that lives on your cheek. It's really different because we're talking about, you know, teeny tiny organisms. And so, you know, the difference from the like distance from my forehead to my cheek is like the difference from like Maine to Florida, right? So it's drastically different. And so it's a different microbiome, technically, the way you don't see the same animals in Maine as you see in Florida. That was a really long-winded and detailed answer. How many discoveries have I found and what have they been about? Ooh. I deal a lot with methods and method development. So discoveries are kind of hard to define. I've written 3 or 4 papers that like I wrote as opposed to contributed to. And so for me, science is definitely a team sport. So I've contributed to dozens of discoveries, right? By like doing some of the data analysis or helping with the interpretation or the impacts of it, usually doing the data analysis and crunching some numbers for other people. But in terms of things that I've like discovered myself, I'd say 3 or 4 things. And so they've all really related to the microbiome. Like I said, the thing with the skin growing the stuff on the skin that the fungus makes the bacteria grow worse. Or the bacteria doesn't grow as well when the fungus is present as it does when it's by itself. So there was that one. There's the probably the biggest discovery that I had was the fact that at Mauna Loa Observatory over on the Big Island of Hawaii, which is like an upper atmospheric air observatory, the fungi there don't have any seasonal patterns. And we expected them to have some kind of seasonal pattern. We do have seasons here in Hawaii. And they don't. They were really random. No matter how we looked at them, we couldn't find a pattern. That was probably the biggest discovery that I have made to date. Thank you. Sophia said, so cool. Are the microbiomes in Hawaii vastly different than other states? Some of them are, and some of them aren't. So like the one at Mauna Loa Observatory is pretty different because there aren't too many other places that are high altitude observatories in the United States. But a lot of the soil is fairly similar to any other volcanic soil. A lot of our plants are unique, and so they have their own unique microbiomes. Our fruit flies are unique, and so they have their own unique microbiomes, and that's why we're studying them, is because if you guys have taken like any kind of evolution, and you learned about like radiation and like Darwin's finches, where like one finch shows up and then all of a sudden you end up with 20 different types of finches. That same thing happened with Hawaiian fruit flies. One fruit fly showed up and now we have like 20 different species of fruit fly on islands. And so yeah, they're unique. They're not found anywhere else in the world. What's my favorite microbiome to research? Right now, I really like the human skin. I think it's really fascinating because there's a lot of there are a lot of things that are thought of as diseases but aren't really diseases, like acne. There's a particular bacteria that's associated with acne, but it doesn't actually cause acne by itself. And so I had a student looking at that this summer and how to grow it on a plate, so that then we could look at things like how does sunscreen impact that? How do these new, if you've heard the term probiotic sunscreens, usually you'll hear probiotic when it comes to yogurt, but they're starting to make skincare products that are probiotic, meaning they have good bacteria in them. And so that's a really fascinating thing. So that's really interesting to me. I'm also getting into fermented foods. So things like yogurt, and we have, there's a Hawaiian cultural fermented food here called poi, and it's purple, and it tastes like purple. Actually, people say it tastes like wallpaper paste, but it is a fermented food. It does. It tastes like wallpaper paste.
Yes.
I don't know. I think it tastes like purple. Like that's what purple would taste like to me. And it's kind of a gray purple. So it's not even like a bright purple taste. I like it. I don't know. I know that makes me kind of weird.
It's the Hawaiian version of tofu.
Yeah. Tofu is another one, another fermented food. I was gonna go with kimchi. Or sauerkraut, right? Like all these things, they get their flavor from microbes, from bacteria and fungi. If you've seen kombucha, like actually made, there's what's called a SCOBY on top of it, and SCOBY stands for Symbiotic Community of Bacteria and Yeast. So it's very much bacteria and fungi working together to make that like chunk of cellulose that like makes kombucha. And so it's a really fun experiment if you guys get the chance to grow something, right? And making your own kombucha.
I'm drinking a bottle of microbiomes in, right?
Right? Yeah. So that's
it's expensive, so I don't get it often. But.
Yeah. Well, you can make your own if you get one and you save kind of the dregs. And then you put that in some extra sweet tea for like 2 weeks. You'll end up with your own SCOBY at the top of the jar. And then you can just put that into sweet tea over and over and over again. And it ferments and it makes kombucha.
Wow.
Right?
So send us some recipes, right, guys?
Please do send that.
$5 a bottle, and I can grow it myself, right?
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
wow,
So you just need that one starter bottle, and then you can have it for as long as you can make sweet tea. And I grew up in Virginia, so a little bit southern. We had sweet tea around all the time, and I'm like, why weren't we making kombucha? Yes. My parents had no idea that this thing existed. Yes. But yeah, and I can't drink it fast enough to make it myself. So yeah. Someone wants to know if the data that I collect show that climate change is real. I don't look at climate change. Some of the stuff that I was looking at that was really related to the fungi in the air. So I was looking at the fungi in the air. Some of the stuff that's related to that is actually the stuff that that originally showed the CO2 in the air, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing. So we looked at that, and I mean, yeah, all data that I've seen really points to climate change being real. Ask what's kombucha. Let me type that in the kombucha in the chat. And kombucha is actually fermented tea, like that's what it's known as. Kombucha. I think. Oh, look, it even corrected me. Well, actually, I'll send that to everybody. And now I'm actually not even sure that's the right kombucha. Because there is a squash that's spelled very similarly, but I'm pretty sure that's the fermented tea, and it really is just fermented tea. Let's see, do I ever eat something and then wonder about the germs and bacteria that are involved with the food? All the time. Like I said, I really like the fermented foods. I like eating for the fermented foods, but like it reaches the point sometimes where I'm like, oh, this pickle, I wonder like what went into making this pickle, because the pickle sits in vinegar and vinegar is fermented, meaning that it has bacteria and fungi that are in the process of making it. So yes, almost everything that goes in my mouth, I'm like, oh, what's on this? But yeah, and I think it's really fascinating. I work in what's called a dry lab. So I work at a computer as opposed to a wet lab, which is a lot of like the pipetting and the petri dishes and the things that you think of when you think of like biology and stuff. And it's probably a really good thing because I would be trying to grow everything. I'd be like, oh, what's in this vinegar? What's in this kimchi? What's in, what's in my daughter's applesauce? Like everything, like anything that like grows mold. I'd be like, let's sample this. Let's look at this. Let's, I would have this absolute collection of disgusting petri dishes. So it's a good thing I sit at a computer all day. Have I ever been asked to research for companies that sell products such as for acne research? I have not yet. I am not opposed to. I think it's a really neat thing. But because I work in academia, I work at a university, I get to do research, and most of my research is funded by the government, either by National Institutes of Health or National Science Foundation. And so I get to kind of design my own research as opposed to having a company come in and tell me what they want me to research. That said, if I come up with something really cool and a company wants to buy it, I'm not opposed to that at all. There definitely are companies that are doing a lot of research in microbiomes, and particularly, like I said, in the skin. There's a whole bunch of them. There's actually one, I think in New York City or in New York State, that like is selling the bacteria that grow on skin, and they're called mother dirt. And like they encourage not showering, and I am not saying don't shower. Please don't take it that way. But they encourage using their product instead of showering to help you smell better. Would you recommend a student ask if their teacher has any spots available to help with a research project? Absolutely. Ask if they have research going on. Ask your teachers if they have research going on. Ask your teachers if they know someone doing research. My university is largely undergraduate, so it's largely the first college that people go to. So like right after high school, they'll come to us. And I love having them do research with me. And I'm a big proponent of paying the students that are working with me. So it's a part-time job doing research with me. They're either getting paid or they're getting college credit. I've had high school students in the lab before, working with me doing research. I don't think they were paid, but I was not the boss at the time. I just was working with the students. And like, yeah, I loved it. It's fantastic. It's a great way to get into research, to see if that research is something that you're actually interested, to see if you like doing research, because there's a lot of boring stuff that goes into it too. Like there's a lot of reading. Reading's not boring. Sorry. There's a lot of reading poorly written research, right? I love reading, and I love reading fiction and things that are well written. Reading science can be really pretty boring. Oh, sorry, that was not it was how would I recommend if a student ask if their teacher has spots available. Emails. Emails are fantastic if you have their email. If you don't have their email, go up to them after class and just say, hey, I'm interested in your research, or I'm interested in doing research. Do you have any openings, or know of anybody who does? How is my research published? That's a really good question, because there's a whole debate about academic publishing. The short answer is in journals. And so journals are peer-reviewed publications by, they're reviewed by other scientists. Whatever I write, another scientist looks at and says, yeah, okay, I agree with what you've written based on what you did. And then it gets published online usually. You know, there's a lot of debate on wait, so I then pay the journal to publish my article, right? So I say, I've done this work. I want you to make it available to the public. Here's some money. And there's a lot of debate over whether that should be the case or not, or whether the person interested in it should be paying, whether I should be paying, basically where the money should come from for this kind of thing. There's big debates around. That's way more information than you actually needed. The actual question is, how is my research published? The answer is in journals. And so they used to be print journals. Now they're all available online. So you can actually, if you Google me, like Laura Tipton and Microbiome, my articles will come up. Have I received recognition or awards for my research? I have. They've all been local, so I'm not like nationally recognized or anything like that. But I've had some local awards for some of the stuff that I've done. When do I generally have more experiments, summer or during the school year? That's a really good question. So I have more stuff that I personally do over the summer because that's when I'm not teaching. But I have more stuff going on that I'm supervising over the school year because that's when the students are here. And so this semester, I'm going to have 3 students working with me, and they're all going to be doing their own experiments and research and stuff. And so there's more stuff that's getting done, even though I'm not the one directly doing it. I'm working with the students to get it done. And so that's what happens during the school year. Tell us about the fly microbiomes. How do you recognize if it's poop or something else? How is it even collected? Those are really good questions, and I don't actually handle the flies, so I'm not 100% certain. My understanding is that the flies, it's not actually their poop. It's actually, they knock the flies out. And you can actually, if you spin it really fast, a fly body will come apart. This is all super gross, right? So the head will pop off, the wings will pop off, and the body will be left, right? And so if you grind up that body, you get kind of its intestine. Supposedly you can also dissect them, but it involves a microscope. And so and then you can like take out their actual digestive tract and just look at that. So yes, do I look at only the gut microbiomes or all the human microbiomes? So in the fruit flies, we're only looking at the guts. In terms of humans, I'll look at one at a time. And so I'll look either at the skin, or I do have a little bit of some human gut stuff. I have a lot of like human lung stuff because that's all different than the gut, right? Yeah. Oh, and then how do we tell if it's poop or something else? So we actually, the way that we look at the bacteria and the fungi really excludes, so we look at their DNA. And so it really is a way to exclude the host, the human or the fruit fly. And so that's how we know we're actually looking at the bacteria or the fungus or whatever other microbe we're interested in, is we actually look at their DNA. And then we know what the fruit fly DNA looks like, so we know we can ignore that part. Or the human DNA, if that's what we're looking at, right? We know we actually finally finished the human genome like this year. Like it was finished probably before y'all were born, in like 2003. It was officially finished, but like they skipped the middle and they skipped the ends. They finally sequenced the middle and the ends like this year. So that's been really exciting. We now have a like fully complete human genome.
So now they can pair us up with bears and all that, right? make a Frankenstein or something, right?
I mean, we've been able to do it for a while, but
Yeah.
it's not happening. It's too hard.
Yeah.
Keeping that kind of thing alive, super hard. Does the human gut microbiome involve us feeding the gut bacteria with all our food we eat and use their poop? Technically, yes. Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it. We tend not to think of bacteria as pooping. We tend to think of them as producing byproducts or producing something. But if you were to refer to whatever comes out of them after they eat as poop, then yeah, we definitely use bacteria poop to keep ourselves healthy. There's a lot of vitamins and things that like humans can actually not produce, a lot of like the B vitamins. And so we rely on bacteria to produce them for us by feeding them all the right foods that we eat, which is usually fiber. Usually they want fiber. You guys ask really great questions, by the way. I'm really impressed. Do we feed the mitochondria also? I think indirectly, you could say that we do, because the mitochondria is part of the bacterial cell. Wait, is that right? Do bacteria have mitochondria? Oh, now you've got me thinking really hard about biology. It's been a while. And I'm just going to slide over here and Google that. Huh. Okay. Bacteria don't have mitochondria, according to Google. And that's one that I'm willing to go with Google on. So no, I guess we don't feed the mitochondria except in those cells that have them. Interesting question. Okay. So because mitochondria is an ancient bacteria, so who feeds them? So it's this this idea that mitochondria were a bacteria that was engulfed in other bacteria and now continue to live there. So they actually they've lost a lot of the genes to like take in food and take out food, and so they deal with something. Wow, this is not going well. This is why I'm not a biologist anymore. So it's they take in nutrients from the cell that they live in and then produce energy, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds close. Right, bacteria and viruses need a host. There are a lot of bacteria that actually don't need hosts, that are free living, but viruses always need hosts, yes. And mitochondria always are no longer able to live freely either. But they don't go between cells. Stomach ulcers, would they be a symptom of microbiomes? Sort of. So they stomach ulcers have to do with they're made worse by the presence of a particular bacteria in the stomach, but the stomach is really highly acidic, and so it doesn't have many things growing in it. But there's this bacteria H. pylori that is associated with stomach ulcers and apparently makes them worse. But that doesn't mean you should get rid of it. It does something good. It's like a really complicated relationship between humans and H. pylori. But there's like a lot of research done on it. Stomach ulcers are tricky. Why do I enjoy my job? And if I could pick another job, I do love my job. I love talking about science. I love that figuring things out and playing with numbers and playing with biology and stuff. Oh, that's my microphone, sorry. I yeah, and I love that I like get to read and things for like, I get paid to like think deeply about things sometimes and then share those thoughts with other people, right? Like that to me is one of the coolest things, right? And now that I'm teaching classes, I get paid to like take what I know and tell it to other people, and watch those light bulbs go off above their heads when they like get it. Like, I love it. I love that feeling. I didn't think I would, but I really do. So if I could pick another job, I, huh. I always, actually, I think I'd probably brew beer or something like that, brew kombucha at this point. Something with fermented foods, which is so closely related to my research that I don't know if it counts as another job. There's always the joke about quitting and starting a bakery. I might quit and teach dance. I used to teach dance. So if I could do that more, maybe I would. Ooh. Can bacteria steal ATP from the cell, or can they make their own ATP? That's a really good question that I don't actually know the answer to. I assume they get ATP from somewhere, so ATP being energy. And yeah, it must come from somewhere, but I don't have an answer of where it comes from since they don't have mitochondria. And how can we tell the difference from good and bad bacteria? That is like the question, right? A lot of it is circumstantial, and so usually it's we define them as good or bad by what they're doing, how they're behaving, kind of like no child is a good or bad child, but their behavior is good or bad, right? They're acting good or they're acting bad. So they, or dogs also, we call them good boy all the time, but like, is there really such a thing as a bad dog? So they, it depends on what they're doing. And so if they're behaving poorly, then we think of them as being bad. If they're behaving well, then we think of them as being good, which is a really like hand wavy answer to how do we tell good and bad bacteria apart. I don't mind talking about my daughter. I'm very open about her existence and her role in my life. So yeah, she will be 3 next week. And she is interested in science because I say she's interested in science, right? She's only 3. We have overloaded her bookshelf with books about women in science. So we have Charlotte the Scientist is Squished. We have Ada Twist Scientist. We don't have Rosie Revere Engineer, but we did borrow that from the library for a while. We have like, what do you do with an idea? The most magnificent thing. Like we have so many like science girls in science books for her, and she loves reading them too, so it's not just me forcing it on her. I do hope she will be interested in science, but there's only so much you can do there. What do microbiomes look like? Do they have the same shape, size, color, etc.? Microbiome, that's really hard. So because microbiomes are made up of microscopic organisms, it's really hard to tell what they look like, and they're so varied. It's a bit like, what does the earth look like? So you have like a whole savanna and it's got all your jungle. I guess you have a whole jungle and all the jungle animals. And so it's that same kind of thing. There are some really nice microbiome electron scanning images. So basically they've false colored some pictures of the microbiome, and they end up looking, let me see if I can find a really good one. If I can find one that's real, might be the bigger question. Can I share my screen? Oh, come on. No, that's not a good one. So they end up looking something like this a lot of times, where it just looks like, you know, a lot of bacteria together. But there are multiple different shapes of bacteria. I was trying to find a good, image of it. Okay, so that's a pretty good one. All right, so this is all of the different types of cells kind of floating around in something. Mouse guts. Apparently the gray stuff is mouse guts. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay, cool. What part of Hawaii do I enjoy the most? That's a hard question. I really love Hawaii a lot. I love the kind of attitude towards life, and the people here have been very amazing. But the beach, I mean, that's kind of the default answer, right? Everybody loves the beach. Not everybody loves the beach, but most people that move to Hawaii love the beach. It has really, really nice beaches that very much spoil people. Yeah. Have I seen how bacteria talk to each other? So we tend to look at what they're making. Again, we look at what they're making to say, to try to look at how they're quote talking to each other, right? So that's, you know, they don't verbally talk, right? They send signals out via chemicals. And yeah, so I've done a little bit of work with some of the chemicals produced, either at the RNA level or at the actual chemical level. I've looked at some of that stuff. It's all really complicated, and that's where like data science comes in, right? So it's because it's this like massive amount of numbers at that point. So it, excuse me. So yeah, so it you know, it starts getting really complicated mathematically to start looking at all that stuff. Are some viruses microbiomes? So viruses are part of microbiomes, usually, and they can be considered part of the non-living part of it. But you know, so they're studied separately usually. Science and biology in particular has had a history of like breaking things down into smaller and smaller parts. And so like they tend to study just the bacteria, and then just the viruses, and then just the fungi. And so it's a lot of math to try and study it all at once. So yes, short answer, yes, viruses are part of a microbiome. Can I tell the students what they need to study in order to go into the field that I'm in? Statistics. A little bit of some other math, but a lot of statistics, and a little bit of biology. Particularly, I work in microbiology. I work with things that are really tiny, but you know, certainly some idea of human anatomy and physiology would probably be useful. Also, there are programs coming up now that are specific to data science, right? So my background is in computational biology officially, but I teach data science. And so there are now programs in what's called data science, and that's kind of this mix of computer science and statistics and something else. So some kind of programming would be really helpful. So I work in a program called R a lot of times. So that's definitely important, and that tends to come with the statistics, but it could also come through computer science, which is another good one to study a bit of if you can. Yeah, those are probably the big ones. But like I said, there are newer programs that are focusing on data science as its own science, including mine. If you guys are at the point of looking at colleges, we do rolling admissions and have a lot of scholarship opportunities, especially in the sciences and in data science. And we're in Hawaii.
So I didn't want to type that, but I just wanted to ask if you would be available for the kids after. Usually some people like me, I always have a question after we're all done, right? So
Yeah.
if they want to ask a question later on, they could email. My email was probably how you guys received the invite to the meeting. So if you want to come through me, I could ask Dr. Laura the questions. She's probably busy, so it'll probably take a couple of days or so to get back to you. But you know, I think most of the people that we've asked to present have always been open and accessible. So
Absolutely. I love answering questions. Like I said, I love talking about science. So I am happy to answer questions. And if I can't answer it, I will try to find someone who can, or some resource to point you in the right direction, right? Where do bacteria get their energy? I'm legitimately curious about that now, and we'll probably spend the rest of the afternoon on Wikipedia looking at that. So
somebody asked that question.
yeah, they did. Well, they asked if bacteria have mitochondria, and it went down a whole thing, and I still don't know the answer, and that's bothering me. And that might be one of those like defining characteristics of a scientist, as far as I'm concerned, is that I'm really stubborn and really curious. And so when I get curious about a question, I don't stop until I find the answer or some satisfactory conclusion, right? Like I am really stubborn in that way of like, if I need to know, I need to know, and good luck getting me to think about something else.
That's good though. I think that's what's needed to do the research that you do, right?
To some extent, yeah. I tell a lot of my students that a lot of science is being stubborn, and being a bit of a completionist. Like, okay, I started this experiment, I'm gonna finish it. Like, I'm gonna do it. I go hiking sometimes, and I'm not very outdoorsy, but every once in a while I get dragged on a hike, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna make it to the top. I started this hike, I'm gonna do it, even though like I don't actually enjoy hiking, I don't actually enjoy the view, but like I started this, I'm gonna finish it. So
Yeah, because you have me thinking about the forehead and the cheek thing still, and I was like, I'm wondering if that is because the heat is it hotter up here versus
it's
your.
actually the oils is the big difference.
Oh, okay.
Right. So for most people, and everybody's a bit different, but for most people, your forehead's a bit oilier than your cheek. Your cheek's a bit drier. So like your forehead and your chin are probably pretty similar if you have like that oily T-zone. The big comparison about skin that they usually make is like the inside of your elbow, because that's really damp compared to your forehead. And somebody actually took the experiment, and they like took the microbes from the inside of someone's elbow, put them on their forehead, and then saw how long it took for that spot to look like the rest of their forehead again. and like it's minutes. Like it just, those bacteria that thrive in the wet part of your inner elbow will not live in the oily part of your forehead. So
Wow. Amazing.
right, I was like, that's so cool. And somebody like thought of and did that experiment, right? Somebody was like, I wonder what happens if you put microbes from the elbow on the forehead. And then they like got someone else to be like, yeah, okay, you can move my microbes. And they did it.
Wow.
And
I'd be
to me, that's
afraid.
just super cool.
Yeah, I'd be afraid.
I'd be like, wait, you want to do what?
Exactly. All right. Does anybody have any more questions?
Oh, that is the question. Sorry. Do we have more there's all kinds of questions coming in.
Oh yeah, they're coming.
Do we have more bacteria than human cells in and on us? So there was a paper a few years ago that said, yes, we have 100 times more, 10 times, sorry, 10 times more bacteria than human cells. And it turns out that like if you go back and dig through like the assumptions that went into that calculation, they did not account for, among other things, they did not account for red blood cells, because red blood cells don't have nuclei. They're hardly cells. And if you do it that way, if you count red blood cells, it turns out it's like 50-50 and like shifts when you poop. So there was another paper that came out more recently that said like, okay, well, right before you poop, you're probably a little bit more bacteria than human. And right after you poop, you're probably a bit more human than bacteria. But it's that 50-50 balance is kind of the current thinking. But it's all really hard to measure. And that's based on like cell count, right? So you could also do it based on gene count, like what are these cells capable of doing? And then like the bacteria have like 100 times more genes than the human cells, because there are so many different types of bacteria and they have a range of function. They all have this range of functions, whereas the human cells are all nearly identical, no matter where they are on us. That's a really cool question and I think a really cool answer. And I almost got 10% human like tattooed on me, and then like that paper came out that was like, no, it's really more like 50-50. And I was like, woof, dodged a bullet there, because no one wants a tattoo of wrong science, right? Would the knee and the elbow be similar? I think so. It's an interesting question. I'm sure that they're more similar than like the elbow and the forehead, because they're both like wet on the inside, dry on the outside, whichever side you're looking at. So yeah, so they should be fairly similar, but they're also exposed to different things, right? So, your arm, your elbow is oftentimes out in the air, whereas like your knees are, I'm touching my knees now, by the way, you can't see that on Zoom. They're usually in your pants. So they have some different exposure levels, but they're closer to the ground. So they make it more stuff flying up. I don't really know. It's a really interesting question. You guys ask such interesting questions. I love it. Where are they trying to get rid of acne? They're generally trying to get rid of acne everywhere. Most people don't like acne. Is that the question? Where are they trying to get rid of acne? Or is it like, do you want to know what companies are working on it?
I'll have to come back to you, Jackie. I think she may have meant, were they trying to get rid of acne?
Yeah. I'll put the correct question, doctor. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Typing.
Yeah. I mean, plenty of if you can cure acne, you could probably make $1 million, right? Nia, are you doing okay? You have a funny face on your reactions. She had like the squiggly mouth.
Playing around.
Okay. Just making sure she's grossed out by what I'm saying and not like actually gonna puke.
I didn't even know that when you were telling me about you having to poop and then you're like mostly bacteria. And then I'm in my head going, well, that's why they tell you to go every day then, right? So if you're like
just to make sure you're human.
You're like totally bacteria by the end of the week, right?
I don't know.
You're a monster.
Oh, okay. The individual that did the transplant from the arm to the forehead. No, I don't think they were trying to get rid of acne per se. I think they were just trying to see what happens. But maybe. I think that might have been one of those like secondary or tertiary or like third questions down the list of things. I think they were just like, what happens when I do this? Which is kind of one of those not the best way to do science, but also the really cool way to do science. Like, well, what happens if I do this? What happens if I drop the ball on the mattress, right? I don't know. It's gonna bounce, I guess.
Okay, guys, we got a few more minutes. Come on, a couple of more questions. Again, I know they may be doing you direct, so.
Do any bacteria live in a red blood cell? No. They're super tiny, so they don't. Generally, most bacteria don't live inside other cells, right? They live in between other cells. But bacteria are weird, and there are some that actually do live inside other cells. Oh, what's my normal day like, and what's the favorite part of the day? I don't think I have a normal day anymore. And that's because when you get to college, you start having classes that meet either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. You don't have the same classes every day. And so like my Tuesdays, Thursdays, this week, this semester, I am teaching most of the time. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I get to have a lot of meetings and do a lot of research. Isabel, I feel like, yes, that's the story of my life. She's like, flips hair, does it wrong, falls on face. I'm fine, walks away. Yeah, that feels like most of my days. No, not really. Actually, I really love, I don't know, I love my whole thing. My whole job is really cool. Like I said, one of the favorite things that I've done this week is this. I love talking about science. I love talking to, people who are younger and still excited about science. I love getting questions that I never would have thought of myself. So yeah, it's one of the favorite things that I get to do. Before most of you joined, I mentioned that I've gotten really involved kind of inadvertently in a lot of women in STEM, women in science and tech, at different groups in Hawaii. And yeah, it's, I love doing that kind of stuff because it exposes me to different people and different questions than I would come up with on my own. And as far as I'm concerned, science is very much a team sport and requires all different people and all different questions and all different points of view. And that's how the best science happens.
And that's good because I've had a few presenters actually network with one another because they were in the same field. And I said, hey, I'd like you to meet Dr. Laura, right?
Right? Yes. Those are my favorites. Yeah.
I do. I love to do that because if I talk to you, then I talk to someone else and then I say, they need to get together, right? So
yeah. I just before this, I was sending out emails to a couple people and being like, hey, I saw you in this meeting and we should definitely collaborate.
Right.
Like,
right. That's how it happens. That what makes the world turns to me, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think more and more people are recognizing that science is best done by teams, right? So there was a long time of science being done by like lone geniuses like Einstein, Newton, dead white dudes, honestly. And that's not how science is done anymore. Like it is not one white dude sitting at his desk thinking hard, right? It is everybody coming together to do stuff in the lab, to do stuff on the computer, to, you know, look at it from this angle and that angle and a totally different perspective. And so I think that's really important and really cool.
Yes.
What was my favorite subject in school? I loved statistics when I got to it. Until I got to statistics, math was kind of meh. I love science usually. Science was almost always my favorite, just because it was interesting. What's my favorite part of the scientific field of my job? I actually I really like the human health aspect because it lets me help people without like dealing with people. Right. So I don't have to be a doctor and go to med school and deal with patients and sick people in order to help people. Right. Ideally, some of what I do will help the people be healthier. You know, that's kind of the ultimate goal. So that's any schools or jobs I'd recommend for people interested in science, specifically research on the human body. Any school that has a really good pre-med program would have a lot of stuff on the human body. You guys are in California, right? I'm not making that up.
So yes, most of us.
Most of you, okay. So most of the UC systems have really good research programs on all kinds of things. I have known people at, you know, like you think of the UC system and a lot of people think of Berkeley. But I know a lot of people at UC San Diego actually. Has been the big one that's been recruiting. But I also know researchers that do work at Davis, at Riverside, at UCLA, like all of those, that whole system is actually really quite good. And in terms of jobs for people that are interested in research on the human body, like it really depends on what aspect of the human body, because like that really ranges from like physical therapy to like, you know, the insides and how your blood pressure works. So it just really depends on what you want to do with the human body, but there's all different ways to help out with human bodies and human health, in addition to being a doctor. So that's not, being a doctor is not your only option if you're interested in science and, you know, want to help people. So I think that's an important thing to state.
Great. All right, guys. If you have any more questions, just email the Stemsational Girls Club at gmail.com. You guys know that one. And I'll get to Dr. Laura with any more questions that you have. And we really appreciate, this was an awesome, awesome presentation. I really learned a lot today, and I'm sure you guys did as well. Of course,
I hope so.
you're on
Awesome.
rotation. You're on rotation now. I hope you come back. We usually get back to you in about 6 months or so from now.
Sure.
And we'll just gather a bunch of, because I'll have 100 questions for you for the next time you come back. But in the interim, we'll just keep in touch. And if something comes up where I say, hey, I think you might be interested in listening in on this, I'll give you a call too. But
yeah, that'd be great.
We really appreciate, and thank you kids for coming and bringing all those great questions. They always have great questions. You guys amaze me. So
yeah,
we got some future scientists here. I just know it. I could feel it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for great questions, everything. Good luck. Keep up the great work.
You take care.
Thank you, Dr.